Oh hello, I didn't see you there. My name's Caleb Denby, and this is Game Review. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a game between Adolf Anderssen and Jean Dufresne. This game is, of course, the Evergreen Game, known as such because it will never die, even if it should. This was played in the 1850s, and it was a very tactical game, so why don't we just jump into it here. Started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian, bishop c5 by black, and now, instead of the normal gioco piano, a quiet maneuvering game, we see white go for the move b4. This odd-looking move gives up a pawn, but in return, white gains some tempi in the center here. By gaining time, attacking this bishop on b4, the bishop has to move yet again, and now white can expand in the center with d4. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, this pawn is pinned, why can't black just take it? Black was wondering the same thing and captured on d4. White went ahead and castled. Now this is being threatened. These days, black players tend to take it a bit more conservatively, and they just develop their pieces here. Just get developed, get castled, get safe, and that's the way to go against this opening. Instead though, Dufresne was a bit more ambitious in this game, played this move d3, aiming to keep this pawn stuck on the c3 square. White does not recapture this pawn is worthless to him. Instead, queen b3 is played, and already white is creating some threats against this black king. Queen f6 is black's choice, defending the f7 square, but now e5, once again, puts the question to this queen. How can you defend f7 and also not get captured? Black cannot take this pawn, so white will simply recapture, and things like bishop takes f7 will come through. And actually, even stronger is simply rook e1 here, pinning this knight to the king, and after a move like d6, everything is going to fall apart. So instead of takes, we see queen g6. Now, white plays the move rook e1, supporting some potential breaks, keeping an eye on these two squares, making it difficult for black to move either of these pawns. Black continues with knight ge7, and now white develops this bishop, not to any of these squares, but to bishop a3, trying to keep an eye on this diagonal, trying to make it tough on black to get castled. For example, if you try to castle here, you're going to run into moves like rook e3, just trying to keep pressure up on the king side, although perhaps this is what black should have done. Just get castled, get your king safe. Instead though, black plays this weird looking move, b5. Perhaps trying to take a page out of white's book here. Of course, white playing b4 in the opening, but in this case, it makes a lot less sense. White simply captures this pawn. Black does gain time with this rook by playing rook b8. But now after queen a4 and bishop b6, none of the black pieces are really coordinated, working together. Yes, black has brought this rook to an open file, but it's not really doing anything. It's not working with the rest of black's pieces, and the black king is, of course, still stuck in the center. White completes development with knight bd2. Black plays bishop b7. Now after knight e4, some very nasty threats are beginning to come up against this black king. Black chooses queen f5, which is not going to get the job done. Simply bishop takes d3, puts some threats to this black queen. Knight d6, knight f6 are both threatening to win the queen. Queen h5 is black's choice. And now white plays a bit of a mistake here. It's best to just play simply, something like knight g3, something like rook d1, something like even rook b1. Instead though, white goes for the throat, plays knight f6 check. When after takes, the king becomes totally exposed. The rook on e1 is revealed. Unfortunately, it's not quite as good with the advent of modern chess and computers, and this game has been analyzed to death. And it turns out black is probably surviving here, especially after the game continuation. White simply brings his last piece into the game with rook d1, but now black has a chance to force a draw here. Of course, in the game, black plays queen takes f3. This is not enough to hold the draw. He needed to play queen h3. The reason being, he needed to guard this d7 pawn. Now, checkmate is threatened. White would have to guard against it. Now, after queen f5, bishop d3 is the best white can do. with the repetition. Well, I'm sorry. Bishop d3. What happens if queen takes f3? Sorry, Danny, we're taking a break here. Okay. Stockfish was just confused. I understand now. All right, jumping back into it. And after queen f5, bishop d3 is the best white can do with a draw. Black can repeat with queen h3, and there's nothing to be done. If you try to do anything else, something like king h1, for example, breaking out of the pin, black is simply going to take this pawn and find some safety for himself. In the game, though, of course, black did not find queen h3, and instead took this knight on f3. A natural mistake. Black is still threatening checkmate, but this gives white the opportunity he needed to crush the black king. Of course, it starts with rook takes e7, knight takes e7. Then if you haven't seen this game before, I encourage you to try and find the only winning continuation here. Hopefully you can do it. It's a fun one. Go ahead and pause the video. All right, here it is. It's, of course, queen takes d7 check, sacrificing the queen and allowing white to play bishop f5 check, guarding all of the squares from the black king. King c6 does not get the job done. Bishop d7 is mate. Of course, king e8, which was played in the game, is met with bishop d7 check, when after king f8 or d8, bishop takes e7 is simply checkmate. And this is how the game actually ended. So this game is a real beauty, the Evergreen Game, because it will never die. Of course, some mistakes by both players, but that's to be expected from a game so early on in chess's history, and from such a tactical game as well. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Game Review. My name is Caleb Denby, and I will see you next time.